Mary Poppins was the high-spirited magical nanny of Jane and Michael Banks, two small British children. Julie also starred in many other films, such as the Americanization of Emily, Hawaii, Thoroughly Modern Millie, and my personal favorite, The Sound of Music. In this production, she plays Maria, the lively governess of Austrian naval captain George von Trapp's 7 children, Liesel, Frederick, Louisa, Kurt, Brigitta, Marta, and Gretel. Another of Julie's talents is writing. 2 of her best-known books are The Last of the Really Great Whangdoodles and Mandy. Julie also has 5 children, a daughter, Emma Kate Walton, from her marriage to Tony Walton, 4 children from her second marriage to Blake Edwards, 2 of whom were from Blake's previous marriage, Jennifer and Jeffrey, and 2 who were adopted from Vietnam, Amy and Joanna. In 1998, tragedy struck Julie. She lost her extraordinary talent for singing due to surgery on her throat in order to remove a benign tumor. A year later, she made an attempt to sing again. However, her voice will never be the same. Julie has recently been on Britain's Royal Honor List and is now a dame. Potato chips and corn chips. The story goes that the potato chip was invented in Saratoga Springs, New York in 1853. Multimillionaire Cornelius Vanderbilt complained to the chef that his fried potatoes were sliced too thickly. Chef George Crumb responded by slicing the potatoes paper thin and frying them in hot oil. The potato chip became an instant success. Many companies have made large profits on chips. The most successful brands are associated with the Frito-Lay Company. Herman W. Lay of Nashville, Tennessee was selling potato chips from the back of his car in the early 1930s. He soon became a successful distributor for a brand of potato chips which were made in Atlanta, Georgia. When that company ran into financial problems, Lay arranged to buy them out. It now became H.W. Lay and Company. Meanwhile in Texas, Elmer Doolin was trying to sell chips made from corn dough. This was an old Mexican recipe which Doolin had found in San Antonio, Texas. At first, these Fritos corn chips were made in Mr. Doolin's mother's kitchen. It took a few years before they sold very well. Mr. Doolin moved the company to Dallas and began to expand his market. In 1945, he granted the H.W. Lay Company the rights to make Fritos corn chips for the American Southeast. In 1961, the two companies merged to become Frito-Lay Incorporated. In 1965, Frito-Lay merged with Pepsi to become PepsiCo Incorporated, one of the largest snack food and beverage companies in the world. In 2000, Frito-Lay sold 58% of all the snack chips in the USA. In Canada and the United States, Frito-Lay products had sales of $9.9 billion. The most popular brand was Lay's potato chips, followed by Doritos, Ruffles, Tostitos, Cheetos, and Fritos. Internationally, Frito-Lay has 28% of the market worldwide. That amounts to $5.9 billion annually. Why are potato chips and corn chips so popular? Well, they are versatile. You can eat them by themselves or with a sandwich for lunch. They can replace other forms of potatoes and corn. They can also come in various flavors. For example, potato chip flavors include ketchup, salt and vinegar, barbecue, dill pickle, and cheddar. Potato chips can be thick or thin, ridged or flat, spicy or bland. Chips can be made from many things besides potatoes. There is corn dough and tortilla dough, of course. But chips can also be made from sweet potatoes, parsnips, taro root, peppers, and other vegetables. One caution about potato chips is that they are not a good source of nutrition. Parents who send their children to school with a bag of potato chips for lunch need to remember that these are just a snack. Because snack chips usually contain a lot of fat, they can also lead to weight gain. It is better not to eat snack chips too often and not to eat them instead of healthier foods. In Canada, nearly $2 billion is spent on snack foods every year, and half of this is spent on chips. People are always looking for new flavors to try. Spicy chips are gaining in popularity. The snack chip industry just keeps on growing.
The Stratford Festival. The Shakespearean Festival in Stratford, Ontario, is one of the greatest theatrical festivals in the world. This is the story of how this small town, which is far from any theatrical centers, became so important for drama. For most of its history, Stratford was the county town for the local farming region. It was also a railway center, but it was hardly known for the arts. An Irishman who opened an inn there founded Stratford in 1832. He called his roadhouse Shakespeare's Inn, after England's great dramatist. Soon, the little town became known as Stratford, after the town in England where Shakespeare was born. The local river was likewise called the Avon, after the English River. The little town grew gradually and became the local center for government and law. Stratford people seemed to enjoy the association with Shakespeare. Many streets were given Shakespearean names, such as Arden Park, Portia Boulevard, Romeo Street, and Viola Court. Local schools received names such as Hamlet Public School or Falstaff School. There was still no attempt at Shakespearean theatre in Stratford, Ontario. In 1913, the Canadian Pacific Railway threatened to take over the town. They proposed a railway line running through the center of Stratford, which would have taken over much of the town's parkland. The townspeople voted down this proposal. Instead, they expanded the parkland along the Avon River. These parks were enhanced with gardens, and in 1918, a pair of swans was added. These swans were an imitation of the swans on English rivers. In 1950, it appeared that the railway would be closing some of its workshops in Stratford. The town was looking for ideas that might lead to new employment opportunities. This was when one citizen, Tom Patterson, suggested that the town sponsor a drama festival. Patterson was able to get Irish director Tyrone Guthrie to come to Stratford in 1952. Guthrie agreed to head up the 1953 season. Everyone in Stratford pitched in to raise the necessary money and prepare the stage. Since there was no time to put up a building, the plays were staged under a huge tent. 2 plays were put on during a 6-week season, and with great success. In 1957, a permanent theater was built. The Stratford season in 2001 runs for more than 6 months, from late April to early November. There are 14 plays in production at 3 different theaters. Altogether, there are 668 performances, with a total attendance of 580,000 people. About 40% of the audience comes from the United States. Tom Patterson's plan to ease unemployment in Stratford has worked well. The festival has helped to create nearly 6,000 jobs and generate wages and salaries of $110 million annually. In total, the festival brings about $170 million of revenue into the Stratford area. Of course, to the audiences who come back every year, the main attraction is seeing some of the best Shakespearean theatre in the world. The Stratford Festival Company is Canada's leading acting company, and many of its actors have become internationally known. The Two Cultures. In 1956, English writer and scientist C.P. Snow wrote an essay on the two cultures. By this, he meant that in the West, there's a scientific culture and a literary culture. Scientists do not talk very much to literary men, and vice versa. Neither group seems to know or want to know very much about the other. Snow argues that the scientific people and the literary people are moving further and further apart. Few scientists or engineers read literature. Very few writers or intellectuals know or care anything about science. This, Snow thinks, is a major problem in the world today. Literary culture seems to be anti-science and anti-technology. This affects Western reluctance to train more scientists and engineers. The standard of living in the West and throughout the world depends on having scientists and engineers. Nonetheless, relatively little effort is given to encouraging and developing these areas of education. Westerners who are part of the literary culture do not encourage or understand the scientific revolution. As a result, they are insensitive to the desire of third world peoples to improve their lives through technology. Snow talks about how the standard of living in England has improved since 1800. Snow's grandfather did not go far in school, but he did learn to read and write. Living in 1900, he realized that he was better off than his grandfather, who lived in the early 1800s. Snow's great-great-grandfather was a farm laborer who didn't know how to read or write. Snow feels that a similar transformation could happen even in very poor countries. It could happen in a short time if the West supplied capital and engineers. Snow believes that this is the Industrial Revolution that has transformed the West. This is what has allowed the farm laborers to go on to school and to learn employable skills. In 1800, only a small portion of society could expect to live well. Now, nearly everyone has access to education and training. The same industrial revolution can happen in third world countries. It is the only way to improve the lot of the poor. Snow agrees that most scientists and engineers do not read novels or cultivate the arts. However, he doesn't consider this to be as dangerous as when literary people ignore science and technology. Science and technology are too important to our standard of living to be ignored. Our education systems have to be changed to reflect our need of them. Snow's article was quite controversial. Not everyone agreed with him that science and technology are being ignored by our educational system. But Snow certainly has a point when he says that scientific people and literary people view the world differently. These two different mindsets often lead to conflict in the workplace. Snow may be right that it is too easy for literary-minded students to ignore science, and scientifically-minded students to ignore literature. The war that both sides won. Today, the 3,000-mile boundary between Canada and the United States is known as the longest undefended boundary in the world. But for 3 years in a row, 1812, 1813, and 1814, U.S. armies invaded Canada. When both sides failed to win a clear victory, and the costs of the war kept growing, the two countries decided that peace was the best policy. On June 18, 1812, the United States declared war on Great Britain. The United States had proclaimed their independence from Britain in 1776, 36 years earlier. There were still bad feelings between the two countries. Great Britain was not treating the United States as an equal independent country. British ships were stopping American ships from trading with Europe. British sailors went aboard American ships looking for deserters from the British Navy. If an American sailor could not prove that he was an American, he was taken to work for the British. At the same time, the population of the United States was expanding. Americans wanted to move west into lands held by various American Indian tribes. Some Americans felt that Britain was encouraging the Indians to fight them and was supplying guns to the Indians. In 1812, Canada was made up of a small number of British colonies just north of the American border. Americans felt it would be easy to take over Canada, then Canadian land would provide homes for their growing population. Since Americans outnumbered Canadians 10-1, the U.S. government thought that no one in Canada would dare oppose them. Moreover, Britain was fighting a terrible war in Europe against Napoleon, the Emperor of France, and could not spare any troops to help defend Canada. But in 1812, Canada had one advantage over the USA: good leadership. British General Isaac Brock had served in Canada for 10 years. He knew how to inspire both his own soldiers and the ordinary people of Canada to fight for their country. He was a bold and energetic leader who moved quickly to attack American positions before they could attack him. Brock found a valuable ally in the American Indian chief Tecumseh. Tecumseh had been trying to unite the scattered groups of Indians to fight together against American expansion. He convinced the Indians that their best chance for success was to join the British and Canadians against the Americans. Although both Brock and Tecumseh were killed in battles, their example continued to inspire the defenders of Canada to fight against the American invasions. Before the end of 1814, all American forces had been driven out of Canada. By 1814, Britain had defeated the French Emperor Napoleon. Now it was the turn of the United States to be invaded. A large British force attacked the heart of the United States and burned the government buildings at Washington. Another British force attacked the USA near the mouth of the Mississippi River, but it was defeated at the Battle of New Orleans. Both sides were tired of fighting by this time, and a peace treaty was signed on December 24, 1814. This agreement restored everything to the way it had been when the war began. Although this really meant that no one had won the war, both sides claimed victory. The Americans felt that they had gained full recognition of their independence. Britain would no longer board their ships or encourage the Indians to fight them. Canadians felt that they had shown Americans that they wanted to develop their own country in their own way, separate from the United States. But the biggest result of the war was the decision by both countries never to fight each other again. North American death and burial. Most people in North America die either in hospital or at home. When someone dies, arrangements are made with a funeral home to get the body and prepare it for burial. Funeral homes are private businesses. They usually handle most or all aspects of a funeral, except for providing the burial plot. That usually has to be purchased separately. Funeral homes may operate in many kinds of buildings. Old, roomy private homes and new modern one-level buildings are common types. When the funeral director receives the body, his staff embalms it so it will not decay quickly and will look lifelike at the funeral service. For 1 or 2 days before the burial, friends, relatives, and acquaintances are invited to visit the funeral home and pay their respects to the dead person. The deceased person is usually dressed in their best clothes and lying on their back in a coffin. A coffin is a large wooden or metal chest designed to hold the body. Members of the dead person's immediate family usually act as hosts for the funeral home visitation. They greet the mourners and talk to them about the deceased. Usually, there are happy photographs of the dead person near the coffin. Gifts of flowers also surround the coffin. Usually, the mourners are asked to sign a guest book. The funeral service may take place at a church if the deceased person wanted that. Frequently, however, the service is held at a chapel at the funeral home.